Spectrum News' Kevin Frey joins us now live from Delaware. Kevin, good to see you. We know that Joe Biden has been out campaigning up to the last minute today.
Yeah, a busy day. Despite the fact it's election day, they were not leaving any cards on the table. All four of the key players within Biden land, both the two candidates and then, of course, their spouses, hitting the trail, trying to mobilize voters. They weren't necessarily going to flip anyone today, but they certainly could try to drive some folks to actually head to the polls, going to places like North Carolina, Michigan, and, of course, Pennsylvania.
Earmuffs and everything on tonight. Cold up there. So, Kevin, what's the mood as they wait anxiously, I'm sure?
I haven't pulled out the hat quite yet, Tim, but that's coming if this night proceeds much longer. There's kind of two groups that at least I'm keeping my eye on. There's the Sun Belt states, including North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, and Arizona. Those are the states we're going to probably get a good sense of what's going on there tonight. And so if Biden's able to pick one or two of those off, that's really putting a giant roadblock before the Trump campaign. If those all go for Trump tonight, and we have a sense that it's going in that direction, if that's how things end, then it all shifts up to the old blue wall, which is what Hillary Clinton lost 4 years ago. Biden has been putting a lot of energy there, including in Pennsylvania, where you saw all four of the key players, both of the candidates and their spouses, that descend on Pennsylvania yesterday. And as I mentioned, Biden was back there today. But if it comes down to that, it means we could be here for a little while, a couple days, because Pennsylvania is only starting to count their votes today, meaning this could stretch on for a few days, Tim.
Kevin, things are not looking good for Joe Biden here in Florida. As you know, it hasn't been called yet, but it's trending in Trump's favor. So now it's all eyes on the other swing states. What are you watching right now? What's close?
Right. So, I mean, Florida is one of those states that would have been icing on the cake for Joe Biden. If he was also able to get Florida, we could actually might have had a somewhat shorter night tonight. In terms of what we heard from Biden this evening, when he did come out and address this crowd of basically cars that have assembled here, a sort of drive-in movie feel that the Biden campaign has adopted as kind of their way of doing rallies, allowing for social distancing in this time of the coronavirus. He said that we feel good about where we stand and believes we are on the track to win this election. His words, well, we are keeping an eye on just a handful of states, because if we're checking what the Associated Press is calling at this point, there's just really one more state that Joe Biden would need to win to get to the 270 Electoral College votes that would grant him the keys to the White House. So what are we keeping an eye on in the coming hours? Places like Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, where they are counting those mail-in ballots, particularly in Pennsylvania and Georgia. The margin between Trump and Biden is closing rather quickly. And the question is going to be, is Biden going to be able to top Trump's vote count and win those states?
Has the vice president's campaign, Kevin, commented on the lawsuits that are being filed in these battleground states contesting already the vote even before there's any evidence of fraud?
Right. Well, exactly. I mean, and the main comment you're hearing from the Biden camp, he's said it multiple times, he's tweeted about it, is basically, we need to count all of the votes, plain and simple. Let all the votes be counted. But it's worth noting, even just pulling back a little further, that the Biden camp clearly was preparing for this. They have a legal team that is in preparation for any challenges that they're going to face. And part of the reason they were clued in to do that, I mean, that's kind of general campaign procedure. But beyond that is the fact that Donald Trump has been signaling that he could take some of this to the Supreme Court for months now if a state does not necessarily go the way he thinks it should. So they had some advance warning, shall we say.
Kevin, I feel like we've been looking in that parking lot for 4 days now, and of course you've been standing there as well.
Yeah, it's sometimes a little lonely here, I will confess. But yeah, we might actually see some action tonight. As you mentioned, our understanding is from the campaign that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris should be doing some form of address later this evening. Their spouses both here. That would come potentially as we might get a call in the next few hours as these results continue to come in. But they are such slim margins in some of these remaining states.
The president already tweeting just before 6 tonight that he should not declare victory. Do we know what Joe Biden and potentially Kamala Harris might say tonight?
hate to tell you this, Tim, but honestly, we don't. We have really no sense of what he is going to be saying this evening. And quite frankly, if we don't have that victor, according to calls from the AP and other news agencies, before this address reportedly will happen, then it's going to be a strange needle that he's going to have to thread, because we, of course, all remember what Donald Trump said the night of the election about, declaring victory. It would be kind of strange for Joe Biden to come out and say the same thing. And so with that tweet in mind, he's going to have to walk a fine line, but surely he wants to reassure his supporters, Tim. Our understanding from earlier in the day was that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were supposed to speak. Now, that seems like it might have been slightly contingent on there being a victor declared by major news agencies, and at this point that has not happened. The vote counting in Pennsylvania, which is where everyone had been keeping their eyes on throughout the course of the day, kind of slowed a bit this evening, though there was just a bounce for Biden in one of the more recent vote dumps. So he's about 30,000 votes ahead at this point as they continue to deal with those mail-in ballots.
Kevin, we expect projected President-elect Biden to give a victory speech this evening.
Yeah, that's going to be coming up around 8 o'clock in the 8 o'clock hour, and we expect him to continue what he has done throughout the course of the past week as we've been left in kind of this interregnum period, but also over the past months on the campaign trail, calling for unity, calling for people to come together and to calm the state in the country. And of course, we have seen such an outpouring in so many cities across the country today. Let's just start with the historic nature of this campaign. You had one candidate that for a period of time wasn't even on the campaign trail, that being the man who is declaring victory tonight. There was, of course, the pandemic. There was the racial strife in the streets throughout the course of the summer. And then there is the economic collapse we've seen. And so that's where we find ourselves, and that's what Joe Biden is going to be inheriting. It's been a question that's been hanging over the nation for almost a week at this point, Kristen, and we finally know the answer. The AP, other news agencies projecting that Joe Biden is going to be the next president of these United States. And in that speech last night, a sort of drive-in rally that allows for the social distancing during the coronavirus, he called for unifying, for coming together, saying this is a moment of healing. He also reached out directly to Trump supporters, saying, let's give each other a chance. And those are, of course, themes we've been hearing from Joe Biden throughout the week as he's been preaching patience as those votes were tallied. Now, Joe Biden is going to make some history, being the oldest president-elect in our nation's history. At the same time, his running mate, of course, Kamala Harris, making plenty of history of her own, the first woman VP-elect and also the first woman of color to serve in that position, something that she touched on last night in her own remarks, saying that she may be the first, but she's certainly not going to be the last.
You're talking to us from Wilmington. What is the mood like there today?
Well, we're standing in a park because after all those days in the parking lot, we wanted to relocate and get a little bit of a different sense of the community, the parking lot where the rally was held the other night. And we've seen various people walking by. I saw one woman with a Biden mask. I also saw another woman walking, and I asked her, are you proud of your hometown boy? Obviously, this is where Joe Biden lives, and she just kind of nodded very excitedly and said, yes, we are. So there certainly is some pride in this community. And we should mention that Joe Biden was out and about a little bit today. He visited church and also the cemetery where his first wife, young daughter, they were both killed in a car crash, if you remember, several decades ago, and also his son Beau are buried there. So he was out and about, though our understanding from poll reporters that travel with Joe Biden that he is basically done for the day. We probably will not hear from him any further today ahead of tomorrow's announcement involving the coronavirus, Vivian. And obviously, fighting the pandemic is going to be issue number one for Joe Biden, likely to dominate the first few months, if not the first full year of his term. And so he did roll out this new task force of sorts that is comprised of experts in the field, including a former head of the FDA, a former Surgeon General, to help advise him and Kamala Harris as they finalize their plans so they can hit the ground running on day one.
The president has not conceded. How will that affect the transition of power in the days and weeks to come?
In fact, not even just not conceded. If anything, his legal team continues to fight these battles in various states regarding his accusations of voter fraud. And quite frankly, they're not providing much of any evidence to back any of those claims up. When it comes to the transition, obviously, as I mentioned, Clearly, Joe Biden is gearing up on the coronavirus front. We expect him to start naming potential nominees to fill various key positions in the next couple days or weeks. But there is one technical thing going on within government that could provide a little bit of a hindrance. An agency within the federal government essentially has to pull a lever to begin the transition process. That includes funding, that includes additional support to the incoming administration. So far, the government has not pulled that trigger yet.